Today we're going to be talking about the folklore behind and drawing Hobbs, and possibly Hobbits, which given their connection to the English countryside, I'm going to be drawing as hedgehogs. Specifically, I drew this picture, a gentle countryside scene of some animal-shaped fairies swimming. When I draw something meant to be cute, I almost always like to start with the circle for the head. While I draw, I'm going to talk about the known lore of hobbits from the English countryside, which is sadly very short. The word hobbit is mentioned only once in the collection of English folklore in the book The Denham Tracts as part of a list of magical creatures. This list is pages and pages long. It mentions grants, hobbits, and hobgoblins, but that's it. No word or mention of what a hobbit is. Lists like this are common in folklore, but are usually about as useful as a screen door on the Star Trek Enterprise. Still, there are a series of creatures called Hobs and Hobthrusts, which are well documented and could be related to hobbits. These are typically friendly creatures of the countryside. Back to my drawing, if you want to draw something cute, you need as little detail as possible. Think about a baby in a jumper or a fluffy kitten. I should also note that despite the fact that I'm drawing hedgehogs, hobs are more likely to assume the shape of a horse or a tiny old man. I like to explore my drawings. Which means I'm going to be playing a lot with lines that don't go anywhere. Hops were the protectors of households and commonly associated with the fireplace in people's homes, or they were wilderness creatures which lived in holes in stones and other places, and were asked to cure illness, especially whooping cough, by concerned parents. One such hob lived in a hop hole. Parents would bring a sick child with whooping cough to this cave and whisper, "Hob hold hob hole hob, my bairn's gotten to kink cough, take to off." Okay, I said that without the accent because I cannot do any of the English accents justice. It's kind of an interesting, silly little rhyme, but for a moment think about the emotions behind it. With this little rhyme, the mother is begging the hob to save her child's life. Also think for a moment about how loved the hob must have been. They're like the pediatrician of the fairy world. Other hobs lived in people's homes. For example, one lived near Yorkshire. He churned butter, made fires, and performed other chores until he was given clothes, at which point he vanished forever. Why hobs disappear when they're given clothes seems to have varied. The hob in the previous story said, "Ha, a cloak and hood, hob'll never do more good." Why wouldn't he do more good once he got clothes? It might be because he had been banished from fairyland and was forced to work for people until such time as he got rewarded with clothes. This is the case with at least a few other house fairies. Sadly, we don't have much record of this in England, however. We do have a donkey-shaped fairy in Ireland who was banished from the fairy court until he got rewarded with the gift of clothes. And we do have a fairy in Germany who was banished from fairyland and so had to work for humans. Another hob, however, seems to have been insulted by the poor quality of clothes he was given. This was common too, for fairies to be upset that people didn't respect them well enough to give them what they were due. Fairies tend to be obsessed with respect. A hobthrust worked for an innkeeper in return for bread and butter, and he left because they forgot to leave him his meal for one night. There are a lot of features in the wilderness named after hobs. Hob holes, hob caves, hob hills. It does seem like hobs were wild creatures. They weren't necessarily tied to any house or family. They could leave whenever they wanted, and did. So why would they work for humans? There is a tradition in Europe of inviting magical creatures into one's home to help with chores, to bring luck, and to obtain wealth. In France, these magical beings often took the form of cats, as with Russia. In the Frisian Islands, a man named Haro Harrison invited a little fairy into their home by offering them a hollowed out log to live in and a bowl of gruel and butter. In essence, people domesticated fairies with the offer of food. The same is true of hobs, who were obsessed with butter and bread. We don't really have as many tales of this happening in England, however. Mostly because by the time the stories were recorded, every house had fairies or weren't interested in obtaining one. There are two more points that I should mention. The first is that Hobbs were also the potential name for familiar spirits who aided witches, which makes sense given that familiar spirits often taught witches their magic and Hobbs knew healing spells. Finally, Hob is a word used in a lot of contexts, and not always the same way. For example, there was a ghost or monster of some form called Hob Headless, who could not cross a stream. Where have I heard that before? Right. In general, Hob means a friendly creature of the countryside, whether in somebody's home or a hill nearby. So I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and like if you did.